Forgiveness does not change the past, but it does enlarge the future. Forgiveness sounds like huge, you know? What do you think?
You're right, because it can take on this big connotation that someone has to do something really bad also for forgiveness to be necessary. So anything that's not really bad can be like, I can let that go.
Correct,
right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like too big of a word for day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, that's how it felt. Like I've just never thought about it that way. But as I was writing, I was like, wait, I know what forgiveness is. Like I know shit in my life that I've had to forgive and let go. So it's like forgiving and letting go. But with this argument that we had last week that we're going to talk about, feels like I just need to let it go.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Interracial Couple Podcast.
Where it's not all black and white. My name is Sarah.
And I am Matthew. And here we are diving into week 7 of the Lover's Journal. Well, why don't we start with the quote? Do you want to read us what the quote for week 7 of the Lover's Journal is?
Yeah, sure. Forgiveness does not change the past, but it does enlarge the future. Paul Boss.
All right. So, it does not change the past,
but it does enlarge the future.
How's that working out for you? Is it good? Is it true?
It is true, but I also think that forgiveness takes some time to happen.
It can.
And, you know, like, as I was journaling, I was like, is letting go similar to forgiveness? What do you think?
Well, I think that probably depends on what the issue is, because sometimes the issue is me, in which case letting go is important. You know, and I say that meaning that there are times, and I think we'll talk about it today, where we have a challenge or there's a struggle and there's something that needs to be forgiven. If I have to forgive you, that's one thing. Letting go almost feels like the thing that hurt me, that you did that hurt me, was tied in with a part of me that was not strong enough to handle that.
Yeah, I think I was reading that, I was thinking like forgiveness sounds like huge, you know? Like it's like a process that I have to go through, and it is. And some of the things I feel like they don't need forgiveness, you know? Like as I was writing about the reasons that I was upset with you last week, I didn't feel like I needed to forgive you. I felt like I just needed to let go.
So let go of a certain expectation of the way things should have been, or how they should go.
I just didn't feel like there was anything to forgive. Like I was just like, you know, there are things in my life where I've felt like I really need to forgive this because it's heavy, it's occupying, it's taking a lot of energy. But with like my fight with you, or like my argument with you, was just like, I don't necessarily feel like I need to forgive. I just feel like I need to let it go.
Right.
You know? So
forgiveness you're right, because it can take on this big connotation that someone has to do something really bad also for forgiveness to be necessary. So anything that's not really bad can be like, I can let that go.
Correct,
right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like too big of a word for day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, that's how it felt. Like I've just never thought about it that way. But as I was writing, I was like, wait, what am I forgiving? Because I know what forgiveness is. Like I know shit in my life that I've had to forgive and let go. So it's like forgiving and letting go. But with this argument that we had last week that we're going to talk about, feels like I just need to let it go.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. I actually I think that's a topic that I want to open up and explore a little bit more as we go, because I also have that now. The kind of what you said, that forgiveness seems really big. That's why I brought it up. And I think that when we kind of look at it, can a small thing also need forgiveness? And is the language around that actually important, just to say, you know what, it's okay to say, hey, you know, I need to forgive, but also even to ask for forgiveness, right? Because in a relationship, if one person causes the other pain, and that's either intentional or non-intentional, or even, you know, from a mistake. I mean, there are things that I've done that have hurt you that were not intentional, and that were also not necessarily coming from a place of oversight or malice. It was just like, I just did something, you know, there was a clash of your need and my need, and therefore this thing where you can go like, hey, will you forgive me? Will you forgive me so that we can move on? And sometimes I'm like, well, what's there to forgive? Just let it go.
I know.
But those two things actually have a relationship that, it's a semantics, but semantics are important. The language that we use is really important.
Yeah.
So you did allude to an argument that we had, and I think it's one of the things that actually makes for you and I doing both the journal and doing this podcast, of which we're now 55, 56 episodes in, something like that, where when we sit down and we come to share, we're also sharing our truths, our challenges. It's almost like there's a therapeutic element to it, and that also means that stuff comes up.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, which is the day we usually record the podcast, we're recording this podcast on a Saturday because we didn't do it on Tuesday. And partially we had an argument. So I had a really difficult day. And I just had a phone call with this woman who just was really honest with my business and made me evaluate everything that I've been doing, and I've been doing it wrong for a year and a half. And I was really sad afterwards. And right before the podcast, I was like, I need to process this with you. Because I was really sad. Like, I've been doing something for 2 years that ain't working. But I was just hoping that she was going to be like, you know what? If we tweak this and do this, it's going to work. And I had wasted my time and money, and I have to start over. And I was really sad. And I came to you and I said, can we process this? And you, in your own world, you had your own things to deal with, and you just wanted to do the podcast and move on with the day. And I couldn't do it. Like, I just needed to process that news. And also I didn't know that I needed to process it, which was...
And in fact, the way you can speak about it now with this clarity came from our argument or our challenge, and then what we discussed on our walk when I was sharing with you my journaling about it.
Correct. And so I even tried to journal with the Lava's journal, but I couldn't do it. I was just like, I need a minute,
Or 3 days, depending on how you want to calculate.
Correct.
Yeah.
And looking, doing, because I did my journaling today, it just seems like it's so much easier sometimes to journal after the fact.
Oh, well, for sure. Yeah.
And But sometimes I think journaling is where you pour your emotions, in the moment, but I really couldn't articulate or even put down in words what I was feeling. Anyway, so we talked about all this without even reading
the prompt. Yeah.
Rather.
So, I actually did 2 parts of journaling on this. One was right after that argument, and then for the second part was later that evening. I was in my men's group and sharing, kind of what happened, and it just kind of that's when I realized, and which I shared with you later, was your challenge at that moment was not even the podcast. It was that that was heavy. It's a year, and as you say, a year and a half. It might be a little bit more of time. It's actually more sort of 2 years of developing this business and realizing that one of the main areas where you've been spending your time and your money it's just not working. And, you've been struggling with this. If I abandon it, am I quitting? Or am I just throwing good money and good time after bad? And understanding the answer to that question is really hard, right? I don't know. And because it's come up for you before. And so it wasn't until that night as I'm sharing, I was like, oh my God. I got up that morning. We actually both had a good morning. You had a meeting, and then we had a friend come over. And then right afterwards, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, we planned out our day and this is going to be great. And we agreed that we were going to do this thing. And and I had my day really laid out all the ways so that I could have time to go work out and then get back in time for my men's group. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, these things that I planned that I was going to do, I have to strip them away. If we take a little bit more time, then I won't be able to do A, but I can still go work out, for example. And at a certain point, I was like, well, this challenge or the time that you need is going to mean that now I don't get to go work out.
Yeah.
And so for me, that the beginning of the day was, this is great. And then I'm like letting things go that I had planned on doing because you, as far as I was concerned, were not living up to your agreement. But the other side of that story is that you had just gotten a serious beatdown, like emotional beatdown, from a consulting call that from the outside, it wouldn't seem like an emotional beatdown until you're like, wait, that's thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours that I've thrown down in the trash and it's done. I can never get that back.
Yeah, and I think I also didn't come to that conclusion because I'd been waiting for that call for an entire week because I thought she was going to give me very different advice. Like I thought she was going to be like, I'm going to help you. We're going to do this. We're going to tweak this. And she was like, I'm advising you to pull out. Stop doing what you're doing. And I was just like in shock. Like I just was like, wait, what? This is not what I was expecting or like hoping for. And so I was taken back. And then we had a friend come over and I feel like I needed to show up for like our friend coming over. So I did that. And then after she left, I was just like, reality hit me that, oh my God, I've just wasted all this money and all this time. And I just couldn't move to the next thing.
Yeah. And so for me, what I wrote right after we had that argument was that you were feeling rushed.
You didn't read the prompt.
Oh, I'm sorry. The prompt, you're right, is looking back to last week or the last time when your lover upset you, write about it from their point of view, no matter how large or small. In a week or two, this is going to feel like it was fairly small. Right now, it's feeling still big. We're still dealing with the residual of it because it unlocked a lot of other challenges too. It brought up some of our own differences in how we operate, and so there's a rawness in it right now. But I think in a couple weeks, this will feel small, and that's why we even put that in there, no matter how large or small, because sometimes it's a big deal. Somebody,
even on Tuesday, it felt bigger than it is today on Saturday.
Totally.
So a couple of days later, it feels totally different.
But at the time, and for 3 days, this one felt like a big deal.
Oh my God, I couldn't even write. Like I was.
You couldn't talk to me for about 48 hours.
No, I couldn't talk to anyone. Like I was in shock.
Yeah. Right. And so, of course, knowing me, I'm taking it a little personally. I'm like, what's wrong? Why is she doing this to me? It's a me, which is one of my favorite things you tell me when you're having a grumpy day. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes it is about me. Sometimes it's not. But when it's not, I'll be like, what's going on? Like, or you're giving me the cold shoulder. I'm like, hey, what? In a way that's a little bit defensive and sort of like, tell me what I did wrong or why you're mad at me. And you'll say, it's not always about you.
No, you're not that important.
I'm not that important. But in this case, you were like, it's all about you. And then a few days later, you're like, wait, it had nothing to do with you.
No.
So that was it. And so so what I thought in the moment was that you were feeling rushed, that your prep time and your own process wasn't being honored. So when I said, hey, I'm starting to feel stressed about time, which I was.
Yeah.
And I actually was really careful to phrase it right because I know that you can feel rushed by me. So this was like sort of crafted in a way that I was like, this cannot be insulting the way I'm saying this. I'm starting to feel stressed about time. And in that moment, you were like the snap, and it was like for you feeling this pressure. So that was really what I wrote. But of course, the big aha didn't come until later as I was processing it. And I think that's one of the beautiful things too about doing this is that when I shared that with you, that was something that it was hurting you too much, and it poked something in you about our relationship around time and whatever, that you could put all your energy there and actually later realize even that, this is an issue you and I have to deal with, but this particular sort of trigger, it was basically, that was maybe the match that lit the fuse on a bomb that had nothing to do with me.
Correct. Yeah. So I wrote some of it on Tuesday, and I was like, it's not the last time. It's just happened. So I felt that my feeling on Tuesday when we were doing it was like, I felt that you wanted me to like show up. Like I said I was going to do something. And now I was like saying like, I cannot do it, which wasn't like the words that I used. I was just like, I need to process this, So from my own point of view, I felt like...
Well, you're supposed to write from my point of view.
Okay.
So tell me my point of view. How do you imagine I was seeing the situation?
So I say, like, from your point of view, is that I had agreed to record this podcast at a certain time and a certain day, and therefore I should just show up and do it. That's how I kind of felt. Like, from your point of view, is like, I am not being my word. And, you know, like, as your partner, like, I strive to be my word. And so it's like, why is she not doing this? That's how I saw that you were seeing the situation. Was like, yeah, like, show up and do what you said you were going to do. Because I have other things to do. Like, yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, I also felt like I was not honoring your time. Like, your time is important. You have other things to do. And I wasn't honoring that.
You know, it's so, like, just to listen to that, I'm really moved, actually. I'm really moved. Because for me to be able to speak kind of for you, which is like this thing of, I'm so overwhelmed, I've just found out this kind of bad news. You know, that, for me to be able to bring that to you is beautiful. And for me to be able to see that in that way gives me this amazing amount of compassion in a time when I was feeling kind of like exactly what you just said. So to hear you read that to me, like, this is what I imagined, was like, oh, you do see where I'm coming from. You do understand. And that's really like this beautiful feeling to be like, even though you couldn't show up in that way, I feel seen and heard and honored.
No, that's good, because I do respect your time and I do want to be my word. And also me, that if something happens, like, I also need time to process it and strive to be my word at the same time, you know?
Yeah.